In 2008, the former president of France, President Sarkozy, came out with commissioned a report to better align the measurement of well-being with actually what contributes to the quality of life. And he got the top economists, there was Joseph Stiglitz, there was Amartya Sen and Fitoussi, to come up with recommendations of how to improve measures for social progress and economic performance. And very interestingly, they note that a lot of people feel that they're actually much worse off than what, even though the GDP, that's the measure of economic progress and development, saying that the country is performing better. So you have a bombardment from the leaders, political leaders, saying that the country is performing better, but people actually feel worse off because actually their incomes have gone down. And this was what was was a very relevant issue which was pointed out in this report, that you must, if you want change and if you want basically social progress, then the criteria of measurement must target that aspect of social reality which affects people, if it's people-centered. Now, the GDP is a combined measurement which talks about economic growth, but not how it affects people. And this was very relevant for the kind of work which I'm doing, which is based on gender rights and gender-based violence. In the post-2015 development agenda, gender equality is one of the standalone goals, and violence against women is a very key factor within that. But again, one finds, like Sarkozy, that the measurement indicators of gender-based violence, there's a gap between what actually people are feeling and what kind of threats they perceive to their safety than what the statistics or the measurements may be telling you. So my work has been focused in the last couple of years on measuring this gap, finding, filling in the gap more, not measuring, but filling in this gap with culturally sensitive, gender responsive indicators on gender-based violence. The first thing what we find is that the violence indicators talk about violence against women. Now, you may be aware that honor killings are a very prominent form of violence in much of South Asia, Middle East. In India, we find that it's not just women who are targeted, but even men and even the families who support them. So if you're only focusing on the global established indicators of violence against women, one is only going to measure the violence against women. It's not that men just get missed out, but also it points towards a particular social order which says that particular kinds of people, not just women, but particular people who transgress accepted norms, they are targeted. So if you don't measure that, then obviously your attention is only going to be improving the law and order situation, giving safety for women, and not addressing some of the governance issues which are more important. Maybe that's why people are being targeted, because there is not sufficient governance to protect people, their livelihoods or their way of life, which supports them, and maybe the government policies and programs are not, there's a weak state which does not support this. So that was one of the relevant indicators we developed. So it also includes, violence against not just men and women, but the LGBT community. Secondly, also what we found is when we were working that the crimes against women or target, basically it's an act of violence which is to be measured. And we have very peculiar form of violence in India, which is the missing girl child phenomena, female feticide or female infanticide. And this is a crime, both infanticide and feticide. But you have a huge number of deaths which also occur because girls don't get enough nutrition, don't get proper health care, miss facilities, and they sort of just wither away. So if you have 4 or 5 children or 2 or 3 girls, the lower income groups may not be giving them the best treatment and they just wither away and die. So it's not a crime, but it's certainly a violence because death is occurring. So how do you measure this? Because certainly it affects violence and the gender rights. So we used the administrative data from the census and saw the gap between the men and women, and we used that as a ratio to include within the crimes against women. So these kind of evidence gathering at the local level, the cultural issues, we could use existing data with the census or within the crime records to come up with, let's say, what is the prevalence, basic prevalence of gender-based violence, what are the minimum prevalence rates. So you don't need vast surveys or expend huge money on it, but you can map and track this. Or you can also see what is the social acceptability to violence against women or gender-based violence, for instance. So you have a number of cases on sexual-based, sexual harassment on the streets. Women may be teased and harassed in the buses and public transport or even in offices. But most of this doesn't get reported. What does get reported is what is brutal, physical, and violent. So you have crime rates from the police on the departments, the criminal justice system, which show the extreme violence. But the normal violence is much more prevalent, and it's not gathered. So how do you, see what is the level of violence against women? So we devised a technique where we found, made a ratio between what are the non-grave, reporting of violence like dowry demands and sexual harassment, and a ratio vis-a-vis the more grave or death-related violence. So as the confidence of the public increases in the criminal justice system, you will have higher reporting on the not so severe cases, and obviously there will be an impact on the extreme cases. So this kind of a ratio we got a measure which measures the social acceptability of gender-based violence, and I think we could come out with these issues and concerns because we were working at the grassroots and trying to measure that, so constructing both from below and also rating them and linking them to the global standards.